Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host That Creepy Reading, and today I want to share with you 3 paranormal stories. Now, honestly, paranormal events is some of the most creepiest shit to me. Honestly, think about it. What is more scary, someone who might be lurking in your backyard, or the possibility of some weird and strange monster possibly lurking in your house or in your own backyard? Whether it's the rake, the chupacabra, or a plethora of other creatures, these things still have a possibility of existing and lurking in your very own backyard. These are 3 strange stories about paranormal entities. That being said, let's begin. Arms. I remember when it started. The woman next door who was strangled to death in her bed with no sign of forced entry. Although her window was open, she lived on the 5th floor without a fire escape. The killer was never found, and the apartment remained vacant for some time to come. After that, she died. I started having night terrors too around this time. I would awaken suddenly, grasping for air. One night, I opened my window and stuck my head out and tried to take some deep breaths. That's when I noticed him. A man. What appeared to be a man, standing in the window of an apartment across the street. It was the only one with lights on, and his body was just a silhouette. I couldn't really make it out at first, but he seemed to have his arms outstretched towards the window. He almost looked like the Babadook in a sense. The next night, I woke up again in a panic. This time, I really felt like someone was choking me, but there was no one there. I assumed this incident with the woman next door was just making me paranoid. So, for the first time in my life, I was a little scared to be alone. As I opened the window for fresh air, I noticed him again, just as I did the night before. There was one apartment across the street with its light on, with a man standing in the window with his arms outstretched. Is this all this guy does? I would mutter to myself at the time. Maybe he's not right in the head. I had this eerie feeling that he was looking right at me, but it was hard to see what direction he was looking in with his actual eyes. And honestly, he could just be a strange individual who just kept his arms outstretched towards the window. I remember closing my window, pulling my shades, and going back to bed. However, this did not stop me from getting a little curious about the man in the apartment across the street. So I bought some binoculars, and during the day, I watched his video to see if there's anything strange going on. There was no activity, not even any furniture visible from that window. It was almost as if he moved out the night before. I watched until the sun went down, but no light in the apartment ever came on. That night, I dreamed there was a man in my window, like my late neighbor. I lived on the 5th floor, and there was no fire escape. It was hard to see his face, but I could feel his eyes examining me. His presence was thick and suffocating, almost intoxicatingly so. I struggled to avoid his gaze as I ran to the window, attempting to close the shades. Before I could scream, he reached right through the glass and put his hands around my neck. And that's when I awoke, terrified and convulsing. The window was opened, though I had closed it earlier. I vividly remember closing that window earlier. Coughing and wheezing, I stuck my head out and again took a breath of the night air. It was unusually quiet. No cars on the road. Looking down at the street, there was a long stretch of lights penetrating the looming dark shadows, and reluctantly, I panned up, and I found the source. Again, there was an apartment across the street with a light on. A man standing in the window, his arms outstretched. I grabbed my binoculars to get a closer look, and immediately I was petrified. He was most definitely staring at my window. His arms seemed to be reaching exactly for me. I locked my window, pulled the shades, and hid under the blankets. Each night I became more paranoid. I stopped looking out my window, and I kept it locked at all times with the shades down. Even so, I could feel him staring at my apartment. I even thought about calling the police, and I did, but every time they came, they didn't find anyone but an empty apartment. As usual, I woke in hysterics the next night. My window was still locked, my shades were still up, and I looked across the street, and the man with his arms outstretched in the vacant apartment was out there with the window open. This is my chance. If he could hear me, then maybe I could get a response out of him. "Hey, what the hell are you looking at?" I shouted, but there was no reply. The man remained silent and motionless, his arms extended slightly beyond his open window. I thought that he would at least be startled, but he showed no sign of acknowledgement. "Why are you standing there every night? Come on, just fucking tell me." Still nothing. Just as I turned my head away, his light went out. I looked back to see if he was still standing there, but it was too dark. I slammed my window shut, locked it, pulled the shades, and turned on the TV, but there's no way I was going back to sleep, or at least that's what I kept telling myself, until I started to pass out. I couldn't help it, so I shut off the TV and climbed into bed. Later that evening, I had another night terror, and the feeling like I was being strangled as usual. The sensation didn't stop, however. This time, I was really being strangled, 2 hands clasped around my neck, attempting to squeeze the life out of me. As I struggled to break free, I tried to look at my attacker. I followed the arms, expecting them to lead to a body, but they just kept going. They stretched all the way through my open window, and I couldn't believe it. These arms are reaching into the 5th story of my window, all the way to my bed, and they were fucking choking me. I flailed around, trying to wrestle myself away from the freakiest extremities, kicking, screaming, scratching, but it didn't faze them. The grip was so tight, it hurt to move. I reached out in desperation for the knob on the nightstand drawer. As the brittle nails dug into my skin, I managed to get it open, trying to reach inside. It made the choking even more painful. Frantically, I felt for anything sharp. I eventually grabbed a pen and begun stabbing the left arm with every ounce of strength in my body. I don't know how many times I stabbed it, but eventually, it pulled back a little, removing the hand around my throat. I grabbed it and pulled it to my mouth, and I bit down as hard as I could until I drew blood. The arm shook violently, trying to pull its hand from my jaw. Choking on blood, I unclenched my teeth and both arms begun to retreat while I spit and gagged, trying to regain my lost breath. I stumbled to the window, hoping to slam it down, but just as I gazed at the fingertips, I watched in horror as the arms, which had stretched all the way across the street, retracted. And my heart stopped to when I saw what they were attached to. They were his arms. I couldn't look at the hideous limbs as it wobbled and wrapped, returning to their normal length. He then put them down on his sides, and the light went out in the vacant apartment. This time, I didn't just lock the window. I moved a bookcase in front of it. I sat on the floor shaking, trying to get my thoughts together. What was I going to tell the police? A man reached into my window from across the street? They'd surely think it was a prank call, but I needed someone to check that apartment, at least check it while it was still night. I would never be able to sleep again, so I decided to make a quick anonymous call about a domestic disturbance. Eventually, 2 police officers pulled up to a building across the street, and they went inside. And a light soon came on in the window, and I waited for something to happen, hoping I didn't just send 2 unwary men to their deaths. After mere minutes, the light went out, and the officers returned to their vehicle. Their voices just managed to carry up to my window, and I heard them say something that I was hoping they wouldn't. No one lived there. And according to the records, after the event, no one still does. A few weeks later, I saw a moving van outside of the building. Someone was moving into that apartment. I was relieved, though my night terrors had already stopped. One night I couldn't sleep, so I turned out the light and looked outside, and I noticed someone across the street looking out their window. However, I got a weird feeling. Kind of like how I just wanted to reach out to them. So I looked out my own window, my arms outstretched. The Pale One. The woods were once a place I cherished, where I spent my long weekends away from school. I live in a country close to Cache Lake, near the hamlet of Spedden. No one comes out here anymore. Most of the town was burnt to the ground some time ago. It only has one store now, a small store owned by a distant relative of mine. It is in this practical ghost town that this creature lives. The abandoned houses are its playground, the woods merely a place for it to hunt. I found the first image of it on a cell phone that had been in the woods, a Nokia X7, the same phone I have. The phone itself was frightening for me to find. No one comes into the forest, especially not in the early spring where the nights are cold. How it got there, it did not matter. I took the phone, charged it, and I was curious what had been lost in it, and perhaps I could return it to its owner. There were about 20 contact numbers, most of which belonged to people who I'd never heard of, and written in a language that I could not understand. Curiosity got the best of me, and I texted some of these people, letting them know that I had found the phone and wanted to return it. However, no one responded. So, being bored and with this dead brick of a phone, I decided to check out some of the images. The first image was of a black and white cat with large orange eyes. It was sitting on a blue couch, looking up happily. The next was of a blonde girl, grinning like an idiot, besides a dark-haired man. Was it the owner of the phone? Or maybe it was her father? Or maybe the phone belonged to the dark-haired man? The last image is what caught me. The first one was, well, strange. The woods at night, with a pale figure near the bottom of the screen, perhaps a finger reflecting a flash. The next was of the forest floor. Then, well, the third was very surprising. It was of a wide mouth, with rather human-looking teeth. The skin of this creature was pale and lunging out of the darkness. The last was a very bright image, as if someone had taken the picture very close to someone's skin with the flash on. Unsure what to make of this picture, I left the phone in my room and went to go check out the woods to possibly find more stuff left by this mystery person. I was quite bored and I lacked TV or really any sort of internet connection. The woods seemed off that day. There was a very strange musky smell in the air, like a unwashed kid, greasy and unpleasant. Had it been there earlier? I couldn't remember. There was a trail on the ground made by something wide and flat, with a lone handprint, small and broad with pointed fingertips. I couldn't see what had left the trail, but I didn't really worry about it. Possibly just a prank, possibly just an animal. I don't really know every animal that comes through these woods. Night came and I slept restlessly, listening to the early frogs on the lake. There was another sound, loud and hollow, like a deep bellow. We had bears here, but this didn't sound like a bear. Let's just say I didn't sleep that night either. I went out again the next day, relishing in the 4-day weekend. I had to find more stuff out there. No one just leaves a phone out in the woods and nothing else, right? There was a new crawling trail on the ground. This one led to an old coyote den. The musty reek was strong here. I looked down in a dark hole. I was shuddering in horror as I saw some rather slimy looking rocks. As I was walking back, rather unsure, I heard something. This time it was a slight hissing sound. I turned around and looked, catching sight of a low-slung body sleeking back into a thick brush. It was white and smooth, and the underside was streaked with blue veins. I stepped back and I started to run, seeing the brushes shake near me. My parents didn't believe me when I told them what I saw. They assumed it was nothing. That night, I looked into the field behind the house, and a lone deer was lying in a recently pillowed dirt. Something pure white was somehow attached to its body, writhing. The morning after that sight, I went to go check on the deer. And of course it was still there, but its side was ripped open and still bleeding. The wound edges were ragged and pale, and it looked disgusting. My dad dragged the body into the woods, and I was shaken. Our farm is far from the road, surrounded by trees. The house had 2 stories of white siding and shuttered windows. The buildings are sandy brown from the bellowing soil. Chickens cluck softly in the hen house, while our dog sits on its ass in the front yard. The woods seemed alright that day. I walked through them, listening to my dad's tractor in the distance. The thing that, well, I saw that creeped me, I know it. It was a brief glimpse of this pale form as it darted through the shadows. However, once again, I couldn't get a good look at it. The whole time I walked, I could hear it moving. But I tried to ignore it, pretending that it was just a wind. Why be afraid of it? It hadn't hurt me yet. The next day it rained. My parents took me into town and I hung out at the old school. I was sitting on the rotten wooden swing and watching the rain pool on the metal side. There was a sound from inside and I went into the school, knowing that it was safe on the inside even though it was closed. And, you know, even though it did catch on fire, it still seemed to be in fairly good shape. The halls were lined with rainbow lockers, bright and clean. It smelled like rain and floor polish, even if the old wooden floor was no longer shiny. There was a rattling from down the hall, and I saw some lockers swing open and hit together. A thin, tall whipping noise could be heard. I ran after it, figuring that it might be a stray dog in the building. I rounded a corner, my feet pounding hard on the floor. I felt my balance slip away and I fell. And then I saw something loom from the shadows. It was pure white and in the darkness, a veiny belly. On the floor, I could look up at it. And I gotta say, it's one of the most terrifying things that I'd ever seen. Head reared up, it looked at me. Had a short neck, small legs. The head was round with a wide slit of a mouth. It stood on small, faintly withered hind legs, tail sweeping against the floor. And the musty reek just choked me as it rolled onto my side. It fell heavily onto the floor, sharp claws skittering across the smooth thing. I heard it snarl before it ran towards a still open double door and then vanishing into the distance. That night, I could hear it hollowing outside of my window. When I returned to school on Tuesday, the bus had to go quickly through town. I looked out the window, and once again, I saw it against the rotten wall of a house, and I wasn't the only one who saw it either. Each night now, it comes up to the house, and I can hear it hollowing. Angry. I know it's there, but I don't know what it is. Perhaps I'll try to get more pictures for you guys. As of right now, this is the only thing we have. The hole in the wall. I moved my stuff out, I called the cops, and I informed my absentee landlord. I've done all the proper things. There's nothing I can do but share my little fucked up city living story. About 6 months ago, my girlfriend and I moved into an apartment in Benton Park neighborhood of St. Louis. About 2 weeks after we moved in, her grandfather who raised her had a fucking stroke, and she ended up going home to Twin Oaks to go take care of him. She was living with him full time until we could afford a nurse or a hospice. Anyway, I'd been living in our 1-bedroom apartment all alone for the last half a year. It's beautiful and newly remodeled, double pane windows, and great insulation. The best a couple of hicks and yuppies could afford, at least. It's got a couple of weird things about it, as you'll see. There's only 4 units in the building on the 2nd and 3rd floors. However, we're on the top floor. The first weird thing about the place that we noticed right when we moved in was that the walls and floors are fairly paper thin. I could hear every word of my downstairs neighbor's conversation at all times. I know when they take a shower, I know when they fuck, and I'm pretty sure they know the same about us. It's pretty weird. The more info we had on each other, the less we wanted to actually know each other. They moved out 6 weeks ago. Then the other 2 units went vacant later. It's kind of weird, but also kind of awesome because I can finally stop around, watch porn, play Rock Band at full volume. I can pretty much do anything I fucking wanted. About 4 weeks ago, it got weird. It was about 1 a.m. and I was going to bed, and I started to hear this noise from the empty apartment downstairs. Really quietly at first, but it sustained. It sounded halfway between a hushed conversation with only one person talking and a small motor running, just babbling. Not quite regular, not quite a drone. It never really freaked me out at first, but I was able to rationalize it as plumbing or refrigerator downstairs or something. Something I'd never heard over my downstairs neighbors farting or snoring. I learned to live with it. It rose and fell every evening, and pretty soon, a steady tapping sound started, with mumbling. I know it sounds fucked up when you hear it every night for a while, but pretty soon you start to make excuses for it. Then I kept hearing boards creaking. It's spring, my first in this building, so I assumed it was just old boards under the new drywall settling. Then one night, as I was brushing my teeth, there was a mighty, dry thump right behind me. I just about stabbed myself with my toothbrush. I stayed really still until I was sure there wasn't anything in the house, and then I turned the lights on, and that's when I noticed a weird peculiarity in the remodeling. On the other side of the bathroom where I heard a thump is the hall closet. I opened it up, switched on the light, expecting to see a box have fallen off the shelves, but it's all gravy inside. I tapped on the wall between the closet and the bathroom, and it sounds oddly hollow. I then started to realize that the closet isn't as wide as I think it should be, based on the bathroom. I paced it out with my feet and then a tape measure just to confirm it, and sure enough, there's about several inches of space in between the two walls that were just adjacent. Again, rationalization time. Surely there was extra insulation to keep the bathroom warm. Or maybe the walls are thicker than I imagined, because fuck, I've never built a house. So this one thicker wall and this huge, that must have been one thick fucking wall, or a huge ass rat tumbled down and freaked me out. No big deal. I felt better at the time. Even better when this was the first night that I did not have that weird noise below me. So everything was fine until last Friday night. It's about 2 in the morning and I'm home late from a bar. Not as drunk as I wanted to be. And remembering that I left all my clean dryer the day before I went out. One thing that sticks out as I climbed the stairs is that the door to my apartment below me was closed, and it had been open ever since my neighbors vacated. I got kind of used to seeing the empty mirror image of my place every time I walked past it. Maybe the landlord was showing it to people today. Rationalize, rationalize, rationalize. I bag up a small load of laundry and climb down the back porch steps into the laundry room, which really is just a part of the garage, but the staircase in on the outside of the building, and it gives the floor a little shared porch. I get down there and into the room, and I start bagging up all my clothes into this big black duffel bag. 2 things you should know about me at this point. I turn every light when I leave a room. I don't care what it is, I turn it all off. My dad used to beat the shit out of me every time we got an energy bill a penny over the norm. And I also lock the door every time I go through it. Hell, I even locked the back door when I went down to my laundry room. I started back up the stairs, up the first flight. I look up straight into my bedroom window and the lights are fucking on. And there's a silhouette against the closed blinds. I nearly pissed myself a little as every hair on the back of my neck snapped to full fucking attention. And that's when the light goes out. Again, there should be no one in my fucking apartment. It happened less than a second. 10 seconds later, I'm still frozen in place and trying to figure out what the fuck I just saw, if what I just saw was real. Rationalization lost fucking out, thank fucking God. And I snuck down the stairs through the garage, and I called a cab and stood across the street from the building. Again, looking through my own living room window. About 5 minutes before the cab showed up, the Vietnamese blinds parted slightly for a few seconds, like someone was looking down at me, and then nothing. I stayed in a hotel that weekend, and then a couple of buddies of mine went back with me on Sunday to see how much stuff had been stolen. It was all there. My laptop was still charging, even my brand new plasma TV was still there. The doors were locked, and I moved it all out that afternoon. My friends were with me. I still had daylight on my side, and I checked the apartment below me. The downstairs closet seemed to be a abnormally thick wall too. Only someone hammered through this wall. There was a big, round, jagged hole exposing a tiny crawl space between. And in this space, against the flat of the wall, was a cheap hardware store ladder leading up through the darkness to the space behind my walls at my own apartment. I don't know how he got into my apartment from there. Maybe there is a way through the heating vents in my ceiling. I really don't give a shit. All I care about is never seeing that building again. I mailed my keys to my landlord and told the whole thing to a terribly dismissive and disinterested cop. Done my part. Moving on. Quitting my shitty job, which might be a good thing about this. I'm typing this all out at my new house's, or rather my friend's house's Wi-Fi. I'm going to take the convenient time to get the fuck out of Dodge and move in with my girlfriend and her grandpa. He died a few nights ago. Still think I'd like to head back into the country. I guess, I don't know. I hadn't told her yet. I'm not sure if I will. But I told her our landlord went apeshit and kicked me out. She already has issues with the security, and I don't want to add to them. But I never ever want to live in that apartment again, and honestly, I'm just not sure what to do. This story was credited to Joseph K. Thanks, Joseph K, for writing this. You're awesome. You actually put a credit in the description too, so yeah. Also, guys, I want to add a few announcements, and there's going to be an extra story at the end of this, but not because I'm an asshole, but because of an issue I'm going to explain. Anyway, if you're still listening to me, I would like to let you know, because I really should clear this up, there is a live stream that will be going on Saturday. Yes, this Saturday on, let me check the dates here. The live stream should be on Saturday, the 21st of this month. I am sorry that it's been postponed so many times, but god damn it, I've been having a lot of issues, and I just fixed my editing program. Secondly, there's going to be an extra story at the end of this because I originally did a narration for Let's Read. However, I didn't finish it in time, and he got someone else to do the narration. Sir Aim is a good person. I love Let's Read, but I put so much effort into this narration that I don't really want it to go to waste. So if you haven't already listened to Let's Read's narration, or rather Sir Aim's narration on Let's Read's channel, then you can listen to this story as narrated by me. I hope you guys enjoy, but yeah, this story is called No Homophones, and it's credited to Umbrello. And Umbrello is a very talented writer, but here's my only issue. The story that I was narrating physically made me feel sick, and there are parts of the story that were pretty, dark. It's pretty much a psychological look at a serial killer before he really starts, and you really do get a feel for him, and the way that he writes his character is pretty damn good. It's also a creepypasta, so take everything with a grain of salt. None of this stuff in this actual story actually happened, but it's a pretty damn good story. I put a lot of effort into the narration, and let me know what you think. Also, if you got to this point in the video, be sure to leave a comment saying that I am a piece of shit, because of course I can't narrate and I suck. So yeah, let's begin. I've always been a good speller. Some people have the knack, while others struggle through their whole lives to spell even the most rudimentary words. With the advent of the internet came widespread apathy towards proper spelling. I'd just assumed to join the masses, but I'm sure I'd never forgive myself. Not after everything that's happened. Allow me to explain. In the 6th grade, there was a spelling bee at my elementary school. Long story short, I won. It wasn't fair, really, considering the 4th and 5th graders were involved. But I didn't let empathy sour the moment. My classmates were thrilled and offered their sincerest congratulations up until the point I hadn't been much of a standout kid. But now, I was a champion of sorts. It was a moment I longed to relive. As the winner, I was invited to compete against local schools and then possibly advance to regionals. Exciting as that all was, I couldn't help worrying since I tend to freeze up when I was put on the spot. The first spelling bee was no problem. I was at my own school, which was a small, very small community with only some other students and teachers there. But now, I would have to stand up in front of people I didn't know, people who I'd never seen before, and I'd have to keep my cool. My first challenge was at a much larger school. I was relieved to find that despite the competition taking place in a sizable auditorium, I would have a small audience of just parents and a few teachers, and no bratty kids to hackle me. Being on stage was a little disconcerting, but having been forced to perform in a school play, it wasn't entirely unfamiliar territory. The other kids didn't look too bright, and I figured they'd come from a school where nobody could spell for shit. This is gonna be easy. Before we begun, the usual rules were dictated by a pronouncer. I won't bore you with the very, very, very specifics and rules, but she made it a point to emphasize that there would be no homophones. Words that sound the same, but are spelt differently. Usually, when given a homophone, the competitor would usually ask for a definition. However, in this particular spelling bee, I was to expect no homophones at all. Not a single one. I could push them completely out of my mind. Homophone? What's a homophone? Things got out to a good start as expected. Naturally, the words started out simple and gradually became more and more complex. Not enough to stump me, though. I was right about the other students being absolutely pathetic spellers. 2 of them were eliminated early on by some really basic words. My confidence was skyrocketing, and the effortless victory seemed to be within my own grasp. But then, out of nowhere, this bitch did the unthinkable. She gave me a homophone. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Whoa! That's harsh, considering that you could just ask for the definition. Well, you're right. I could have asked for the definition. Oh God, why didn't I ask for the definition? My 11-year-old mind struggled to understand why someone would be so insistent and completely contradict themselves. She said before there would be no homophones. No fucking homophones! I felt like I had been thrown under the bus. You could hear a pin drop and a wolf howl in the distance as I stood there like an idiot, trying to untie the knot this woman had just fastened on my fucking brain. The word was either Colonel, like Colonel Sanders with a C, or Kernel, like a kernel of corn or a popcorn kernel. I never really found out which. I was too preoccupied with the whirlwind of questions orbiting around my head. Which word am I supposed to spell? Why didn't she give me this word? Why did she say no homophones? Why is she doing this to me? I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, I wanted to cry, but I did nothing. After a painfully awkward and seemingly endless silence, I was told to hurry over, or I'd be out of time. Afraid of being disqualified, I spat out the only thing my mind could scramble together, a combination of both spellings. C-E-R-N-O. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. I was mortified. What the hell just happened? Did I really just spell it that way? Why did I do that? Why the hell did I do that? No. It was that bitch's fault. She fucking lied to me. This is my chance to show everyone I was special, and she just ripped it away from me like a greedy troll trying to snatch bread from a hungry child. I wanted to protest, but I couldn't make a sound, paralyzed by my denial, my confusion, and embarrassment. They had to play me off. So, to speak, some dazed fool. I was clearly distraught, but no one seemed to understand how severely. My father attempted to console me, but He didn't try that hard. I suppose it was futile, or maybe he was just bad at that type of thing. I pleaded to that stupid woman, but of course she dismissed it like it was no big deal. I kept telling my dad. She said there'd be no homophobes. I wanted him to confront her, to do something about it, but instead he shrugged it off. She knew what she did. That bitch knew what the fuck she did. Everyone at school was sympathetic about my loss, which only made me feel worse. Now, then I'd imagine that dumbass kid who won the spelling bee smiling with his shit-eating grin as that evil woman pats him on the back. It was obvious that I was a better speller, so how in God's name did that moron win? At least they were from different schools. I'd never have to see him again. Still, my anger didn't fade, permeating into every facet of my young life. I stopped caring about my grades and started acting out in class. The teachers were surprised and my parents were worried. Maybe it's unfair to blame everything on that one experience, but the humiliation that I fostered kept growing and mutating as I refused to let fucking go. By the time I entered high school, I just didn't care anymore. It's a slippery slope once you give up on life. And not unusual for people to start going downhill in their teens. Bad grades, bad relationships, bad choices. That's the road I traveled into my 20s. That's where I left into. Roads like that didn't lead you to places worth going. I'm in my 30s now, and things are worse than ever. I can't keep a job. I'm undateable. I piss off everyone I come in contact with. Not too long ago, something happened that I thought would change everything. It was easy to convince myself to give in to the anger that I'd been bottling up for all these years. I don't even know what I'd been waiting for until it fell into my lap. I was on the line in the supermarket when I heard her voice. There was a familiar tone and the way she enunciated. I knew who it was. I glanced over as she reached for the package of frozen corn for a shopping cart. A small tear in the bag caught on the head of a spray bottle, and the corn started to leak out. "Oh darn," she said. "Kernels everywhere." My ears caught on fire. The way she said, "Colonel." It just had to be her. She kept saying it over and over, as if she were mocking me, laughing and joking with the cashier about Colonel here, Colonel there. Apparently she thought it was funny. Something inside of me snapped. And all I could think about was how to wipe that stupid smirk off of her face. I don't remember thinking about what I was gonna do. It just kind of happened. One moment I was in the parking lot, and the next I was following her home. I had to know where she lived. As she pulled into the driveway, I made note of the house number, and I continued on, looking straight ahead. I repeated her address over and over to myself, spelling out onto the street name each time. Every day I drove around that neighborhood, passed by her house several times. It started as a hobby, but then it grew into an obsession. Sometimes at night, I would just sit in my car, watch her family through the windows. No one seemed to notice me. Her smiles, her laughter served further to cultivate my inescapable hatred I felt. I'd mumble as if I were listening, utilizing every manner of profanity to express my disgust. Eventually, I found I had memorized her work schedule and her husband's as well. It was only a matter of time before I confronted her alone. It was freezing that day. Many people were keeping warm inside, but I made sure to wear a ski mask so no one was able to identify me. And gloves, of course. I parked my car a few streets over and walked casually over to her house. And I'm not sure what possessed me to go there in broad daylight. But I knew her husband would be at work, so I took my chances. In a bold move, I went right to the front door, knocking impatiently. Soon I heard footsteps and a woman call, "Just a minute." As raging rivers of adrenaline surged through my own veins, the door swung open, and I came face to face with my own sworn enemy. Can I help Before she could finish, I punched her in the throat, shoved a wet rag into her mouth, and then rammed the bitch with my fucking shoulder, sending her backward, giving me room to close and lock the door. She tried for the rag, but I hit her in the stomach. I got behind her, wrapped my arms around her neck, and then dragged her into the kitchen as she floundered and flailed. Red-faced and wild-eyed, I smashed her head into the counter and threw her to the ground, planting one foot firmly on her throat. She tried her darndest to move, but she just wasn't strong enough. Knives and knives were everywhere. I had to find the biggest one. I need to terrify her. I need her to beg for her life. It seemed like her arms were getting tired, so I lifted my foot and proceeded to kick her in the head repeatedly. She tried to get away, but I kicked her in the ribs. I just kept kicking and kicking. The rag was coming loose. I took a break and I jammed it back into her mouth. I then sat on the floor and watched her struggle for a moment. There was something beautiful and innocent about it. I wondered why my face hurt. I was smiling too hard. The petrified woman was now incapacitated from the pain and exhalation. I climbed on top of her and I waved a knife around in a childish manner close to her face. My body was shaking and so was hers. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I felt like God. A judgment was at hand. What I did next still troubles me. You poor thing, I teased. You're looking rather pale. Did you need some hair? My enemy tried to respond, but her voice was muffled and crowded by coughs and gurgles. Maybe you sound a little hoarse. She once again bellowed. My dear lady, is that any way to treat your guests? You can moan or groan till you're blue in the face. I won in control here. Her eyes revealed a sense of defeat, not much of a fighter. That's a right reason. I just kept on throwing these weird fucking homonyms at her. I pulled the rag slowly from her mouth while I grinned and gazed into her frightened eyes. She seemed to be relieved briefly, and she begun to be able to breathe freely again. I waited for her to settle down. I pointed a knife below her chin, and I began my monologue. I bet you think I'm some sort of serial killer, but sorry to disappoint you, I'm just a regular guy. A guy who missed his great chance of greatness. Since I've been searching for peace of mind, I've been able to find it within you. As days go by, it gets harder and harder. Nobody knows how much pain I'm in. I can't bear it any longer. I don't live anymore. I just wait for death. The woman was silent. Does my tale amuse you? She shook her head slightly. I wasn't sure what to do with her. I'm starting to get bored about you, you know. She then said something. And that's when I had a brilliant idea. How about we play a game? I'll give you a word, and you'll spell it. If you get it right, you can go free. And if you get it wrong, then you die. I could tell she wasn't happy about the game. Can you do that for me? She nodded slightly. Good. Good. Let's begin. I acted like I was searching for the perfect word, but I already knew what it was. I just wanted to savor the moment, to breathe in the fear and redemption. I smiled again, trying not to laugh. Briefly, I questioned my actions. Was I really gonna kill this person? Was this really the same woman who ruined my life? I didn't care. All that mattered was this moment, and I delivered a challenge. Your word is Colonel. Or did I say Colonel? Honestly, I don't remember. Our unblinking eyes looked in battle as I waited patiently for her response. The woman took a hard gulp and a deep breath. Then she spoke. K-E. No, no, no. You have to say the word, then spell it. And then spell it again. Don't you remember how the spelling bee works? I was furious that she had already forgotten the rules. I let us both calm down, and she made another attempt. Colonel. K-E-E. Wait, which spelling? I burst into laughter. Which spelling indeed? I was so proud of myself. The tables have been turned. I had to put this bitch in the same position she put me all those years ago. The only thing left to do was to watch her squirm with a blade in her face. I leaned and whispered, I'm not telling. But that's not fair. Not fair? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You dare lecture me about fairness? Everything came to a head-to-head. I could no longer cage the beast. The knife seemed to move on her own. And I cut her. There was so much blood. Maybe I cut her more than once. Everything was a blur. I'm still not sure if she's dead or alive or in a panic. I got spooked and ran, and I never stopped running. Another state, another name, another life. No one really knew me back there anyway. Easier to disappear than you might think. I guess in the end I'm just a coward. All those years letting myself rot away like it was someone else's fault. Part of me regrets what I did, but in a way it was necessary. I know now I am still that kid who lost a spelling bee, and I wouldn't let myself or anyone else. Perhaps I never will. I wish the story ended here, but I overheard this woman the other day. A hauntingly familiar voice. She's going on about Kentucky Fried Chicken. She's hiring different actors to play their mascot, Colonel Sanders. Long story short, I followed her home.